There we go. Good afternoon.
It is. Well, it is here.
We're 9 minutes away.
Well, here we are, the 27th of November.
Yes.
Episode 33, I might add. Season 3.
We're doing well this year.
We are. And I guess we could call this the Thanksgiving program.
Well, yes, for our cousins to the south, yes. Happy Thanksgiving. I hope you enjoy it. I know we enjoyed ours.
Yeah. We have no pilgrims, though.
Well, we were talking about that pre-production. There's not a lot that we have right now.
Yes. Thanksgiving, U.S. Thanksgiving, Canada is, well, we can be thankful there's not a 25% tariff whacked on us yet.
Yeah. And I'm pretty sure that that's going to come. You know, all the teary-eyed gnashing of teeth and wailing is not going to save us this time, I don't think.
No, it's we were quite surprised, I think, to learn that we are in the same league as Mexico, according to President-elect Trump, who
that's probably not a bad analogy at times. I think there's going to be a lot of people in Canada that are perhaps chagrined or shocked that is the case, but for the last 10 years or so, maybe even longer, we've had the status quo. And the status quo basically is don't rock the boat. We need immigrants. We need people. Well, yeah, I'll agree with that. But I always have preferred the ones that the government selects as opposed to the ones that have decided to self-select themselves. But that's a whole episode and a half in itself, I think.
Well, the question of how this is going to be dealt with between Canada and the U.S. in terms of the border is really in our wheelhouse, because this is something you and I have been involved with all our lives, career-wise. And there's a myriad of questions that I think need to be addressed on both sides of the border. And
very true.
Clearly, the statistics that are being used by the Americans about the threat that Canadians people in Canada who shouldn't be in Canada, the threat they pose to them by crossing the border surreptitiously or illegally or however, that threat is there. And so they point out that last year 19,000 some individuals who are on the terrorist watch list, whatever that is, came through the northern border, which is exactly 10 times higher than it was just a few years earlier. Mm-hmm. So that these are significant numbers, and we can't contradict that, because they've actually taken these people into custody and have records on them and so on.
They have facts and statistics to back themselves up.
Yeah, the only thing that is a little questionable is that's the number of people that they pick up on the southern border on a weekend,
or in some cases on an afternoon shift at some of the busy reports.
Yeah. So the thing that is for us here is, while we don't, I certainly don't question the need for tightening up on that issue, both in Canada and the U.S. We don't need the quasi-terrorists wandering around in and out of the countries, etc.
No, absolutely.
And that's true. And it's quite true that, in my opinion, the immigration refugee program that in Canada, which was fairly respected around the world, has been basically dismantled and destroyed by the current government. over the last 10 years. It's
much like our immigration system, selection system.
Well, from A to Z, as we say, or as they say, Z, there's really a kettle calling the pot black here. Our friends to the south kicked their doors open over the last number of years, with the exception of the 4 years that Trump was in charge. Trump 1.0, the southern border was wide open, and so they've been flooded by literally tens of millions of folks who shouldn't be there.
Mm-hmm.
The same at a much reduced level has taken place in Canada in the last 10 years. So, as I say, the pot calling the kettle black, that doesn't make it okay.
No.
And we in Canada have permitted that kind of recklessness to take place. Now, to fix it, it's kind of interesting that we couldn't fix it ourselves. We have now had to have someone like the president-elect threaten us collectively. It's like collective punishment for a totally screwed up immigration, border security, refugee determination system, which now exists to the north of them, and suddenly this causes them to have the same concerns, or even the same one size fits all solution as that they're doing with Mexico. Now, look, Mexico and Canada, these are two different countries with two totally different ways of doing business.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm a little bit miffed, I guess would be the word, that we're suddenly lumped in with Mexico, that they call a narco state, to some extent. Well, Canada's not a narco state. We might have some crackpots and dimwits running the government, but it's far from being a narco state. And in fact, it's probably a hell of a lot safer in Canada than a lot of U.S. cities are. So, I don't buy into that. But at the moment, the threat by the incoming administration is, if you don't fix up the border and keep us, meaning the Americans, safe from the jerks that you've allowed to enter your country, we're going to punish you. And the punishment is a tariff on everything you make coming into the U.S. Now, that's a pretty big stick to be wielding.
Yeah, it is. Although, I guess in one sense, if it makes our leaders, whether it's the current government or whoever forms the next government, sit up and take notice, maybe it's a good thing. Maybe you should go back to the way we were talking about when we were just boy immigration officers many, many years ago, that maybe we should have not only entrance controls, but exit controls. Right now we have no idea of the number of people that come in that actually leave.
No, I mean, sorry.
Could we spend money on those kinds of issues that we would know? And anecdotally, I had heard when Australia many decades ago had rewritten their immigration legislation, they had 2 points that really struck me as being well thought out. One of them was, we have exit controls. If you don't check out when you leave, you have 30 days. If you've left, and you've got 30 days to prove that you have left, or there is an automatic deportation order against you, which will not allow you to come back to Australia. I think that it seems draconian in one sense, but by the other side, it kind of puts the onus back on the people to abide by the laws of which they're coming in. The other part that I thought was rather interesting was that the minister responsible for immigration had to table before their parliamentary system once a year the number of times that MP intervened on an immigration matter and why. So it kind of takes away the kid in the candy store approach. You know, if you're going to be called or could be called before a parliamentary committee to say, well, gee, Mr. Tass, why did you intervene on 65 cases for this reason? You know, it sure makes sense that you put the onus and the accountability back where it should be. But again, we in Canada have lived a long time under the Wizard of Oz theory. You know, the famous line from Dorothy when she wakes up after the tornado and finds out that this isn't Kansas anymore. We have this thing where we travel around the world and we assume that the powers that be, the police, the agencies will treat them all like they get treated in Canada. And that's just not the case. Maybe it's time for us to grow up, take our rose-colored glasses off and look at things the way they should be looked at. I'm in a foreign country. I guess I have to abide by their laws. And if I don't like it, I have that opportunity to go back to where I came from.
Yes, indeed. And in fact, I think we also have to put on our big boy pants and big girl panties and say, you know, the relationship between Canada and the US on this particular issue has now been elevated to a level where it's no longer just a relationship between two pals and everything is okay. Those days are over if they never existed in the first instance. There's you know, there's a somehow some feeling that's become mythical that, you know, we're country cousins.
Yeah.
And that's not true. We might be country bumpkins when it comes to this stuff, because we're living in a world that's far more dangerous, far more complex, complicated than it ever was.
Very much.
And we're trying to live an existence within that complex, complicated world, which requires you to be more complex and complicated in a predatory way, frankly, to protect yourself. And so the Americans have essentially lost patience, I think, with Canada. Certainly this incoming administration has figured it out, rightly or wrongly, that they need to have the same rules on the northern border as they have on the southern border.
Yeah.
And this is something that we need to understand. There's not going to be a separate set of rules for Canada than there is for Mexico. Okay, the same rules are going to apply. Now, whether the same approach with this tariff stick is appropriate, that's for others to you know, discuss. Certainly over the next number of weeks, while President-elect Trump's edict that on the first day when he takes over power, he's going to initiate this 25% tariff until both Mexico and Canada come to their senses, so to speak, from his perspective on this issue. That is going to be interesting to see, because certainly from my perspective, I'm a little annoyed that he and his advisors lump us in with Mexico on the cause, you might say. Mexico is a country they consider to be a narco state. They've said it over and over again, you know, and how you know, the cartels run the place. That's not we don't have that in Canada. This is a ridiculous approach to say to their best ally, maybe their only ally or friend in the Americas, because you show me another country in the Western Hemisphere that's any more of an ally to the United States than Canada, and then I'm going to say, you know, you're out of your mind. Okay, pick one, and there isn't one. All right, so you know, it might be the sledgehammer as you know, trying to hit the fly. and this is what I wrote in my article in Substack, our written version of the BORDERPOL Journal. But how do we deal with this from this side of the border in order to keep a flow of trade and commerce, which is primary in both countries' interests, number one, and also the security of the region, the hemisphere, in both countries' interests? What do we collectively do? And that, I think, is something that will be very, very challenging for Canadians. And certainly it's not going to be one that the current government of this country, which has managed to wreck the immigration, refugee, border security program, can fix. Okay, this is and I don't trust them to do it because I don't think they have the competence or even the interest in doing so. They're just right now having all their sphincter muscles tightened up because, the president-elect has given them basically the next month and a half to figure out what they're going to do.
Well, I guess this was back many, many years ago, and I thought, when I worked on the land border, the porousness, the laxness that we had on many issues would have been very, very easily solved by the United States by saying there is no visa exemptions for anybody. You want to go and visit the United States, then you have to apply for a visa. I don't care if you were born in Canada. I don't care if you're, 100 generations in Canada. If you want to come to the United States, you get a visa. Ergo, you can't control your immigration problem. People use your country to get into our country illegally, and you can't control that. Then we're going to fix it by protecting ourselves, and it doesn't really matter. You're anywhere along that magic border, 49th parallel and wherever. You don't have a visa, you don't get in.
Well, to some extent, Bob, they did that when they said you needed a passport. So you could essentially argue that they tightened. I mean, you remember back in the old days, you didn't have anything. You rolled up to the booth.
Driver's license, yeah.
Even not even that. The question was, where are you born? And that was it. Have a nice day. But we're way past that now. Not 9/11 destroyed all that 24 years ago. That's what we have today is a mess that we've managed to allow to be created, and particularly the last decade has been really, really horrendous. The incompetence, the screwy decision making, the whole ethos of what purpose does immigration serve as far as the country is concerned. I mean, all of a sudden this gnashing of teeth and clutching of pearls. Where were these people when Roxton Road was opened up, and we had Mounties carrying people's luggage across the border into Canada because all these people were invited in by the current government since 2015. Well, if you feel unsafe in America, you all can just come up here.
Well, that kind of, it was always to me I don't know what, a paradox that we built structures at Roxton Road.
On not a border crossing.
On a non-border crossing, which really was a border crossing. Ergo, should not the safe third country have applied?
Yeah. By the way,
be that as it may, the other side of that coin is, why weren't some of those RCMP officers arrested for aiding and abetting?
Well, look, we can't go too deep in the weeds because the vast majority of the people who are listening to us or watching us go, what the hell are you talking about? The fact of the matter is that our policy was, if you can walk in, you're here. Okay. That's the way it was. If you came in and never left, you get to stay. In the most recent debacle that this government has managed to foist on Canadians coast to coast to coast, and on 1.5 million migrants, was a false hope that if their tiny feet touched the ground long enough, they could stay, and there was a pathway to citizenship. which, by the way, they never actually said. They just implied it. Okay. And it wasn't until everything started to go south that they suddenly, woke up and said, well, people have to go home. Well, you kick the door open, and then now you want them to wander back out. At the same time, you're providing them all sorts of incentives to stay. Okay. So, take away the punch bowl, as I always say, and these folks will go home by themselves. You don't give them housing. You don't give them medical care. You don't pay for their schooling. And if they're not supposed to be here on any particular program or self-funded, adios, they'll go home. Now, Mr. Trump decides that he's going to double down on fixing the immigration issue in the hemisphere, you might say, or the northern hemisphere of the Americas. Well, okay, he might have a military, he might have the National Guard, he might have, Homeland Security. Canada does not possess that kind of a capability. We've never. First of all, it's never been a question for the Canadian government to not allow Americans into Canada. Okay, because it was a north-south projection all the time between trade and commerce and human mobility. All of a sudden, we're now in a situation where, due to this edict that has been proposed by him, we have to now stop people from leaving Canada to go into the U.S. There's no machinery to do that, legally or otherwise. There's no resources to do that. You're going to have to find them. And so structurally, a whole bunch of stuff has to happen here, which this particular bunch of folks in charge haven't a clue.
That's true.
Are probably totally disinterested in doing anything about it. Okay.
Yeah. Well,
if you took every RCMP officer in Canada and put them on the border, you still wouldn't have a border patrol.
Well, I think part of that also comes to the fact that, as we mentioned in some of our broadcasts before, is that we are not only fighting our politicians, but we're fighting our courts. What's going to happen when you decide now that the self-selected immigrant or the self-selected refugee is not going to get housing? Yes. They go to court, or they're not going to get their kids' schooling paid for, or they're not going to get their free medical.
Well, the activists.
We've had a lot of mixed messages coming out of our court systems for the last decade or so on fundamental rights of individuals, and I fault part and parcel the great charter of our Prime Minister several years ago, where you read the thing and it sounds just so wonderful, but at some point that document should have said, this applies to Canadian citizens, people of permanent residence in Canada, people that have been legally admitted to the country, and leave it at that. This whole thing of once your feet touch the ground here, you're covered by a system that you paid absolutely nothing into, but you're abusing and taking advantage of. Now, how many people are in the court systems now, and how long does it take? 15 years to deport somebody? Well, I think that's just ridiculous.
Well, that's the point. When I say, if you take the punch bowl away, and it's not just the punch bowl that is housing and care, it's legal. This legal web that is constructed to save you from any removal by well-intentioned people, I might add. But it's wrong. And it seems to me that there's going to be much more trouble at our end to try to meet this requirement than it's going to be at their end, whacking Canada with a 25% tariff. And by the way, I would like to remind our American cousins that you still get a large percentage of your gas and oil from Canada. And if you whack a 25% tariff on it, you're going to be paying a lot more at the pumps and to heat your houses. So, there's some kickback from this concept as well.
Well, it is a tax. You know, you call it a tariff, whatever you want.
Taxes,
It's a tax.
Exactly. And, you know, there's an old saying, don't cut off your nose to spite your face. You know, we may be a smaller community, but we're also a proud community, and we are also still an independent one. And so we can work, I think, across the border very well. And we have to come up with new structures. And everyone's going to have to do a little give and take, and possibly more giving than taking from our perspective. But I think this thing needs to be dealt with cautiously and methodically, so it serves the interests primarily of Canadians first, because we're on this side of the border, and then we'll deal with you know, bilaterally. You know, there's certainly a lot of imperfections in the system as it exists right now, and we may have to rethink the entire you know, relationship. This is like one of the nails that stick out on the board that you know, the incoming presidency wants to nail down. But there are a lot of other nails out there that stick out on this board as well, that deal with natural resources that are going to have to be dealt with. The business of foreign policy, where do we collectively fit into that? The military, you know, this opens up a big can of worms, which I don't think many Canadians certainly have thought about.
I think probably what it's going to be is that you're right. Think about Canadians first, and you know, while I empathize with what's going on around the world, I've always been kind of a believer that charity begins at home.
You betcha.
You have people that can't get schooling, or can't feed, or can't do this, or can't have a house or a roof over their head. Why are we spending billions of dollars in other places when that money could be put to use here? And maybe that's wrong on my part to think that way, but and the other side of that is what, like you had mentioned, pre-production. You know, the current administration here has now rented what, $44 million that they're putting into housing for the potential influx of refugees coming from the United States. Well, I'm sorry. How many homeless encampments do we have around the country because these people can't afford a roof over their head?
Here's my advice: if they show up at the border from the U.S. wanting to come here, you go, no. You make your claim in the U.S., go to a Canadian consulate, fill out the papers, and we'll talk to you later. Okay? Because that's what we're going to have to do, and that's going to send a message, I think, to our cousins south, that, you know, this works two ways here. Okay, we don't want your jetsam and flotsam any more than you want to be inundated with the people who shouldn't be here either. So, you know, if you're gonna ask for that kind of support, it'll go the other way as well. So
I think that's true.
Deal with the people you got stuck. We'll deal with the people we're stuck with.
I think part of that is that you know, we signed on to the UN Charter, and whether you agree with the UN or whether you don't agree with the UN and its missions, the big thing on refugee claimings is that you claim asylum in the first country that is a signatory to that convention. You don't say, well, you know, it didn't work out well in Germany, so I'm going to go to France. Oh, it didn't work out there, I'm going to go to Europe. Oh, I'm going to go to the United States. Oh, and I'll end up in Canada. You're not a refugee, in my opinion. You're an economic migrant. And as far as I know, that's not one of the classifications to determine refugee status.
No, but it's certainly one which has become the unwritten rule within the NGO community and within the human rights activist community, that you know, that you can do asylum shopping. That's okay. No, it's not okay. But you know, we come down to the basics now of what is you know, acceptable behavior, if you will, by, you know, the people that are essentially looking for a better life. I don't
I don't
fault
vote
for that.
one. No.
But you know what? Life is tough. You know, and this is, I think that's part of, and again, that's part of sort of the myth that in certainly in Western societies, that, you know, outcomes should all be the same for everybody. No, it doesn't work that way. You know, and that's
Well,
why the DEA kind of thinking has seeped into the immigration, refugee, border security ethos. You know, you know, it feeds the DEA mentality. Well, it doesn't work though. Okay, we're not here to make sure that everybody who shows up in Canada or the US for that matter is guaranteed a job, a home, education, health. You know, this is a concept which has literally seeped into the mindset of bureaucrats and their political masters over the last, I would say, 30 years for sure. And it turns out to be a non-starter, because, you know, you cannot guarantee equal results for everybody, and that's been the expectation, and it's a total effing failure. Okay, that's the way it is. So, you know, while we bemoan the fact that you know, we're in a situation right now where we have to come up with solutions to the problems created by essentially the mismanagement of the migration, refugee, border security portfolio by both countries. You know, let's not like I say, this is all very nice from you know, Tom Homan's perspective down in the States. So, you know, we'll show you what we're going to do. Yeah, okay, but you know, we're not some third world, you know, country that doesn't understand the concept here. You know, there's the reason a whole bunch of folks come to Canada is the same reason a whole bunch of folks go to the US, because they're looking for a better life. So if we're such a dump, they wouldn't be coming here. We are trapped in our own success, you might say, and now we have to deal with it collectively. How we do that is going to be the challenge over the next couple of years, because this isn't going to be done over. We got 100,000 people who should be removed right now from Canada and can't be removed because there's no money to remove them. You know, you spend the 44 million to keep these people in housing. It costs $1 million per removal by and large right now. Well, if you've got 100,000 people and it costs you $1 million to remove them, just do the math. Add the 3 zeros on the end of the 100,000. There's no money for that. Okay. And by the way, I would remind all those folks who don't know much about international law and the business of removals, and if they don't have papers to remove to, you don't remove people. Okay. You just don't put people on an airplane, fly them into a desert, throw them out, and then fly away. You know, there's a whole lot of stuff that needs to be done. And even the United States and even Canada has to abide by international law that way. So if you have someone who's sitting in jail, for example, and you want to remove them, you still got to get them a passport to go back to wherever the devil they came from. And that country has to acquiesce to that request. And you might have to whack tariffs on them too, in order for them to show up at the jail to issue the person concerned with the travel passport, whatever. So, you know, as I said, let's not go deep in the weeds. You and I have been there for years. The point is, it's not as cut and dry and as simple as you know, the people in the media might profess it to be. It's
yes,
complex.
It's certainly not a Hollywood movie.
No, it's not. No, yeah. It's not. And anyway, at the end of the day, we're going to get over this. It's going to take time.
Yeah.
We need rational thought, rational arguments. A lot of the emotions are going to have to be carved out somehow on this between folks who will be linked to this emotionally for various reasons, and those who are politically linked to it for, you know, their own success.
Well, and those that are linked there monetarily as well.
Those that are linked monetarily, yeah, exactly. There's going to be a whole lot of NGOs that aren't going to be very happy about this. Lawyers who might be happy to some extent.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, I think we really have to have an open mind, certainly from our perspective, on how we do this. And there's going, like I said earlier, there's going to be give and take. And I'm sure that the business of the negotiating with tariffs is exactly that. It's a negotiating tactic, which President-elect Trump is famous for.
We've had the opening gambit, and now it's going to be up to us to come back and kind of counter offer.
That's right. That's right. And as
yeah, it's been interesting.
Yeah, well, and as George O'Leary said yesterday on his on an interview he was making, it's quite likely that it's not going to be Trump negotiating with Trudeau. Trudeau is really in the end days of his reign, and it's good. Yeah, we can but hope. I guess we're showing our slip here, but the guy that's going to have this albatross hung around his neck is going to be Pierre Poilievre. And while they may have certain similar conservative views on the economy and so on, it's still going to be a tough hole for him. And so it's not going to happen overnight. We're going to see a lot of gnashing of teeth and clutching of pearls and all that over the weeks and months ahead.
Yeah.
But I think that if sense and logic and goodwill, by the way, on both sides prevails, the problem will be solved. And at the end of the day, it probably will bring some kind of reality back to the whole question of immigration and refugee determination, because there's nothing wrong with a positive immigration program.
No.
There's nothing wrong with a functioning refugee program.
Very true.
You know, we need to get back to those principles, and then people will be less inclined to get nuts over statements like we've heard over the last couple of days.
Well, on that fine, cheery note, let's go back to the beginning and wish our American cousins a very happy Thanksgiving. I hope we've given you some food to think about and some dinner table conversations. That,
yeah, that's right. And we're still your pals. Don't worry about that. But you know,
that's right.
Sometimes there's always, even the best of friends, there's a
have spats.
Yes. Anyway, we'll probably have more to talk about next week when we come back, because this is a just an evolving story. Yes, indeed. All right.
Yes.
Well,
don't forget to like us. Don't forget, if you can spare any change over this Thanksgiving, we certainly won't turn it away.
No, we won't. So until then, as they say in Mexico, adios.